It's 8:30 and a good Sunday morning to everyone. I'm Dennis House. Welcome to a special edition of Face the State from the state capitol, where we are breaking down Governor Lamont's very first and somewhat controversial budget speech. And with us today, as they are on all occasions like this one, David Stemerman. He is a Republican, Face the State analyst, former candidate for governor, and Joe Ganim. He is a former Democratic candidate for governor and currently the mayor of Bridgeport. Gentlemen, good to see you back here again today. And Mr. Stemerman, I'll begin with you because I noticed that the mayor was clapping a lot during the governor's speech. You were not. What was the biggest thing that you found wrong with what he talked about in his budget address?
He talked about in his budget address that he didn't want this to be Groundhog Day, with the same problems that our state is facing again and again and again. And when Joe and I were campaigning, we saw that this state wanted change. And the governor talked about change. And while I share his aspirations of a balanced budget, better education, better transportation, I'm concerned that the way he's going about doing it, which is more taxes, tolls, more regulations and burdens on business, is going to put us exactly in the same place where we've been for the last 8 years.
He did call for the dismissal of that business entity tax, which you had called for as a candidate.
I did. So he tossed us a bone. Politicians of both parties agreed with labor union leaders to make promises for benefits that were too generous at the time, and both employers, meaning the state, and employees never put aside the money. And when the governor talked about these structural budget deficits, that's at the core, and I don't think he addressed it honestly, and I don't think he did enough today.
You liked what he had to say.
Yeah, well, I disagree certainly on the last part a lot. He came out of the box in a tough situation. We all knew this for months as we went around the state. This was not going to be an easy moment for whoever the governor was. He stepped up, talked about the pension deficits, a way to address them. There's going to be partnership. Talked about an open door policy. Let's work together on this. Let's figure it out. And touched on some things that I think are very important to the people of the state of Connecticut. And I think that what came through to me a lot was, because I heard him say it a few times, is let's work together on this. My door's open. We got to figure this out. And this is a process. This is the beginning of the process. And I know a lot of work went into kind of laying out a blueprint for a budget. I'm hopeful that it touches on all things we need in the cities and towns and education, all that. And I think they're there.
You live in a city where many of your constituents are living paycheck to paycheck. They live in the most, one of the most expensive counties in the nation. And now they're going to be asked to pay tolls, perhaps if they have to drive from Bridgeport to work in New Haven or to work in Stamford, things like that. How is that going to go over well?
Yeah, I think certainly the feeling for people with tolls, I think is, and he touched upon it, I think better than maybe it came out in the media earlier, was we all want people that are driving through our state who are beating up our roads, whether they're trucks or whoever they are, and we're paying for their states and their highways to pay for ours. But none of us really want to take on the hit. You're right, in an affluent county, in a less than affluent financially city, it's hard. So the debate, I thought the governor framed it well. The debate's out there. He's got trucks only out there. There's bills in there that talk about trucks and cars, and we've got to pay for transportation. I'm a strong proponent that if we're going to move Connecticut forward, it's going to be by rebuilding in large part our transportation system for this whole next century.
Mr. Stemerman, I know a lot of people, a lot of Republicans are against tolls altogether. Is no tolls as a policy realistic?
I share the governor's goal to rebuild our transportation infrastructure. And this is one of the topics that Joe and I agree with. I went to Bridgeport and I talked about what it would mean for the city if we could get the train there in 45 minutes, if we could get I-95 moving again, if we could get an airport in the area. We need to be able to do that. But the way that we're going to do it, and again, I'm glad that the governor spoke about it, is with public-private partnerships. We can't have the same approach that we've taken, which costs too much. It's inefficient. We don't have the expertise. We need to bring in the private sector. We can do these projects, and when the governor says his door is open, I hope he means it, and I hope we can work together to get these projects.
Can he do it without tolls, though?
What I know is that we're spending far too much today, and the approach that I don't like with the governor is he's saying, let's start with tolls. What I say is, let's start with what are our priorities, what do we want to achieve, and then let's ask the private sector to build it for us in the cheapest way possible. And then we'll talk about how much resources we need, rather than saying, let's go get as much money as possible, and then we'll spend it.
Let's talk about some of these new taxes that he's talked about on wine bottles, plastic bags, things like that. How will that go over?
There's always going to be pushback on all of those. I think elimination,
do you support them?
Things like, I think he's trying to go with the sin taxes on those. And so there's certainly much more acceptable. If you say to somebody, hey, I'm going to tax your soda or your vaping, I know my son actually is not going to like that. But But more importantly than that, doing away with things like the taxes, $250 a year, whatever it is on small businesses, I think that's a good move. Sending a message out that he wants to hold the line on income tax and sales tax, at least at the levels, I think is a good message as well, in a very difficult situation where the state needs revenue, and not, which I think people will recognize as though it's difficult, not kicking the can down the road and saying, let's just push it down, let's deal with it now. I think that's admirable.
What about these new taxes?
Yeah, so it is difficult, and I don't want to give any illusion the Republicans don't think that it's difficult. But the place that Governor Lamont began with, it's actually the same place that Governor Malloy did 8 years ago, which is about growth and jobs. What I saw that was missing from this was what was going to lead a business, a small business, a family to say, I believe that this is turning around and I want to grow here, I want to hire here. Some of the other proposals for a small business. I spoke with an owner of a fastener plant in Naugatuck. South Carolina is trying to get him to move, and what he hears now is he's got a higher minimum wage, he's got family medical leave. I'm concerned that he's going to leave, and the young people in Naugatuck, instead of getting a job there, they're going to have no place to go.
You both said many things as candidates on the campaign trail. You shook a lot of hands, told people made a lot of promises. The governor appears to be stepping back from a pledge he made that there would be no tolls on passenger vehicles. How will that affect him politically?
I think that what's critical is establishing a relationship of trust. You know, I'm a father of 5 children, I have a wife, and I ran a business. And you begin with a relationship of trust. Part of the idea as a business person coming in from the outside is say, you're going to take our word seriously. I'm concerned that when you say one thing on the campaign trail and immediately coming out saying something else, it undermines that trust, which is so important for us to overcome these difficult challenges.
Will that hurt him?
It's going to have to play out in the General Assembly and the popular opinion, but I think really getting this budget balanced, and it sounds like there's a real commitment to do that. I hope with a commitment towards the things that we think will be included in it, transportation, education. I've talked about an urban agenda that helps our cities. I think that's a way to build this, balancing that budget. His open door policy, give and take over these next couple of months are going to really make a difference, I think, and hope and be a part of putting Connecticut back on track.
And as I understand, the tolls wouldn't take effect until 2023, so Governor Lamont would either be in a second term or would have a new governor.
My hope with that is that we'll talk about this collaboratively, and that we'll get Republicans and Democrats, the administration, the legislature together and talk about what can we do together, how can we do it, and hopefully we can convince them that it won't involve tolling every vehicle on the roads.
One final question, letter grade for his overall speech.
Well, I thought he gave a very good speech. And you know,
like an A?
Yeah, I'd give him an A. Substance, and then the homespun person kind of came through. I thought that was nice, and he talked to the audience, both in the the chamber, and hopefully to the people.
He does have that charm.
I'd give it an incomplete.
Incomplete, all right.
I view that there's still more that we need to learn.
David Stemerman, Joe Ganim, always a pleasure to have you on, and we'll see you again soon.